Thank you, and we're back at 5:01. Uh, Next up is A8, discuss and provide direction for the contracts for social services with nonprofit organizations.
Mayor Council Jawaria Tareen, I'm your Chief of Staff, and I'm bringing back our agenda item on our discussion for nonprofit contracts for social services. Um, what's interesting? Every time I bring it back and I look around the room and I look at Tammy, who's ready to lock the numbers down, and that's the purpose of my presentation today. Is if we can discuss and have guidance on discussing the numbers for our nonprofit organizations. And I have a table that presents the number they have requested. And your packet has detailed funding requests from each one of our nonprofit partners. The total impact of this funding request for 23-24 is 376.30. So the direction that I'm looking for here today is if we are good with the numbers as presented in the table, or if council would like to go in a different direction and give me guidance on different numbers. This is information I have for you to discuss and provide guidance. Thank you.
Okay. Um, so we will open up for discussion. Councilman Mayor?
I'm comfortable with the numbers that's presented. I'll make it short and sweet.
Okay. Councilman Jackson?
Mayor, there's been a good bit of input from residents regarding this, and I'm sure there is every year. One of the questions that I have, and I've actually gotten, is for MetroCrest services, there's this separate MetroCrest Safe and Sound Child Homelessness. And we talked about this a little bit last time when Tracy presented this, but I'd like to understand that once again, if we're to be repeated, that what is in this separate contract for services. But perhaps the new question is, are there other cities that have a separate contract for child homelessness, MetroCrest Safe and Sound?
I'm not aware of having different cities having a separate contract for child homelessness initiatives, but I can check and I'll get back to you.
Okay. Because if we're the only ones, we have something unique here. Farmers Branch is not the only city in the area that has some child homelessness concerns. And if other cities have a single social services contract with MetroCrest Services, I would suggest that we combine those to simplify that, perhaps. But the other thing is the amount of money. I realize these are services under a contract that are being provided that the city, if it were to otherwise provide, would probably come at a much higher cost. But at the end of the day, MetroCrest Services, Woven Clinic, the Family Place, these are all nonprofit organizations. They're charity organizations. And as I've mentioned before, I've had residents reach out to me and say, you shouldn't be giving my tax dollars to charities. That's my decision. And I get it. I do. But I think there's a balance. And so what I would suggest is we try to begin paring some of these numbers down. And I would be comfortable with a total of 200,000 to MetroCrest Services, combining the MetroCrest Safe and Sound contract into the main social services contract. And then the 50,000 for Woven, 15 for Family Place, the Chambers of Commerce, what they've requested.
Okay.
Can you repeat that? Sorry.
Combine the two MetroCrest contracts. Simply include the child homelessness services under the main social services contract with a funding of 200,000 total. And then the other requested amounts. And I really have no other basis for reducing that number other than I think that we need to begin paring the charitable organization contributions down to help address resident concern.
I can support that.
I would echo, just philosophically, my wife and I give a good amount of money to different charities every year. And philosophically, I would rather not run our residents' charitable contributions through the city. I would rather them decide which charities to give to. And no offense to city staff or anything, but when we run it through the city, there's a little bit that we have to pay for city staff processing and whatnot, I would think, which means there's a little bit less getting to the actual charity. So I can support what Richard suggested as far as the numbers go.
Councilman Bennett?
I would like to see the child homelessness and social services contract combined. I can agree with that. Because I know that some things, I've had this discussion with Ben multiple times, they're not providing everything that they used to provide for us. That's kind of where I go with it. I think for simplicity's sake, the two need to be combined. I'm not comfortable with the number only because they're not providing everything they used to provide. But what does that look like, and how? Because I know we are going to have to compensate for that with some of our programs now. So I'm looking at it and I'm like, I agree we shouldn't be paying out of the tax dollars. That's an individual decision, but we also don't have the services and the ability to expand that within the city right now, so we have to maintain them. But I could live with 225 on that one. I could, and combining it for simplicity's sake for you guys, so you're not always coming with. They're just going to have to break it down what they're wanting next year.
Did you mention Family Place?
Yeah.
No, I know it's up
I
there
just left it up there
as it was.
as is.
Yeah.
Okay. That was the only thing that I had on my list. I left them at $10,000 at Family Place. I had Woven at 50. The chambers were as presented. Then I think as it relates to MetroCrest, we need to be very specific in I'll use your word, metrics that we want to see that help us to justify the spend of money. I think that's really important because we need to know what is being spent in our own community, where it's going. I don't need to know who, but we just need to know
It's in Farmers Branch.
what. And I too had received numerous calls, various emails, probably a dozen, a half dozen maybe, emails from people specifically regarding the city's charitable contributions. And, I told them I'm not the one voting on this matter. You all are. But trying to look for, I guess, balance and what is equitable. I don't think people in Farmers Branch are not charitable by any means, but I think as we're looking at the biggest budget that we've ever had, this is weighing on a lot of people's minds. So what I gathered from talking with others is there's 200 for MetroCrest. I know we had already in a previous discussion said that we were taking out the escalators. We need to review that every year ourselves, and I think that's the responsible thing to do. So if I went by what I was told, that comes to about 308,650.
When you mentioned
And
the family
I-
place earlier, you said 10,000, but it says 15 up here.
He's making
It was an
recommendations.
increase.
but
Okay.
I know in years past, uh, there was a target amount. We had tried to keep spending little less than $300,000, but times change, and obviously it's more expensive to do things now than it was several years ago. So I, I guess I'll put that out for your consideration. Is everybody looking at me? Is that a number that we're comfortable with?
Now, this is for a 5-year, excuse me, I'm sorry. I
Well,
interrupted you, but
then
this is per year for 5 years, right? No changes.
no automatic escalator. I think if there's extenuating circumstance that warrants reconsideration, yes, we should absolutely hear what might be out there, or what the request is.
Yeah, I like the numbers that we've been talking about. I just, again, philosophically, I would rather have the residents making the decisions and get the city out of the business. And it's also, maybe I'm not understanding it exactly. It's also a little strange to me, or very new, that it's a charitable gift, but it's a business contract for services. So, you know,
Other cities have it in-house, like Dallas. And so they have a city staffer and a department for it. And so they don't necessarily we just don't have that ability. We do have now the housing component that we've discussed a few times that used to be handled by MetroCrest, but now that's just not a service they're going to be doing in that respect. And you can get more from that from Ben and Mike. So we are having to bring some of it in-house. So that's where my objection to the numbers are, because we now have to pay somebody, a staffer, to manage, and the money that we are going to give to this. Does that make sense? So, yeah.
It's extra work.
Hmm?
It's other duties as assigned.
I think one thing that you brought up, Councilman Baird, was that it's a 5-year contract. So for 5 years, taxpayers of Farmers Branch are going to be giving $1 million
Right.
to MetroCrest Services. And that in my mind's a pretty big number.
It is.
It's not the same as the chambers, because in my mind, the chambers are a reinvestment in our community, and they have performance requirements, and they may not exactly get all of the money that is on the screen because they may fall short of their performance measures. And they have in the past. There's been times when we've not paid them their full amounts. But so I look at those very differently than the other three. But $1 million over 5 years, $250,000 over 5 years. No, the Woven Clinic is not a 5-year contract, is it?
No, that was a 2-year. Well, this particular request was a 2-year. 2 years, correct? Yes,
2 years. Okay, so 100,000.
but I'm sure she'll come back with something else.
Okay,
We don't know, but that 50 is for
Okay.
2 years.
but the
Maybe
200,000.
we should asterisk that.
So,
And note that.
just to clarify, all these contracts are termed as 5 years, but there is a clause in our contract that it's subject to for the council to review and consider again during the budget
Fine.
review process.
Subject annual funding.
Yes, it's an annual funding.
Well, we know, for example, Woven's going to be around.
Mhm.
And so this specific ask was for one program, and we're agreeing to do that, and then we'll know in 25
Mhm.
they may or may not have a request for something else.
Correct.
Yeah, they're working on a different model to
Right.
not use city funding, and so I appreciate that very much. But that $1 million just all of a sudden kind of struck me over a 5-year period. I realize it's subject to annual approval from council, but it just seemed like a large number.
The other thought I had was just, how did we get to these charitable institutions? I'm sure there are other charitable institutions in our city or that affect our city. Again, I'm not thrilled about the city being in the business of funding these. I'd rather leave that to the residents, so.
So I'll jump in on how did we with these organizations? We don't have a staff member dedicated to social services in this instance. So administering any contracts that we have internally now or that were previously outsourced fall to other duties as assigned on a staff member. These organizations have an existing relationship. At one point in time, council had a desire to open it up and receive requests, not anybody that's on this current council. And it was an exponentially heavy lift because then what are the requirements? What are the standards? It was found to be extremely cumbersome. And then who says who's in and who's not? Is it staff or is it council? And then, Dwyer, can you go to slide 2 on your presentation real quick? Despite these being large dollar amounts, they are extremely small in consideration of the budget and the process we're in. This highlights the amount of council energy that goes into this one discussion topic. So the 5-year term was a request to city staff to provide an opportunity for more focus on maybe the CIP, transfers, our fund-based accounting, the big movers in the budget that really affect how the city behaves in its operational stance and who we are. And so council can always change that through council action, but it was to alleviate hey, these contracts are ending this year, so we have to have this discussion. But this is showing just this time around, I believe we're on meeting number 6 or 7. It's quite a few just to get to this point. And we're at the finish line because I need a final number so I can present my budget to you all for consideration. And so that's just to show why you're seeing some of these mechanics built into the process. The longer term does make it easier, I promise you, because next year it'll be, hey, they have contracts. Unless you have a glaring concern, the contract will carry through and it'll be part of the budget. So that's part of how we're in the situation we're in today. The 3-year contracts worked great because for 3 years before that, every year we went through this process. Every year it was back and forth for at least 5 meetings. Then the idea was, well, could we do a multi-year contract? Would the nonprofits be interested in it? They like the stability of having a good idea, not guaranteed of what the funding level from the city will be. And then we can always tailor the reporting to whatever metrics y'all would like. But that's just kind of a high level of showing how we got to this point and why we're having this discussion today. Okay. So we're just looking for final numbers. We still have to bring the contracts to you all. So we're not done yet.
So we have 200 and we have 225 on the table in full funding on the table. 200.
200.
200.
200.
Okay. So what I'm consensus is 200 because there's 3 votes there. The Woven was at 50, leaving that at 50.
Right.
Okay. The Family Place,
That was an increase from last year.
yes, they
I'm
asked for $5,000 more, roughly, well, $4,500 more. I personally, I had that in still at just 10.
I mean, I don't, if we're lowering other amounts, I don't feel right about raising theirs.
Well,
But
again, for me, it's the metric, if you will, of knowing what they're serving in Farmers Branch, what specifically, and I'm missing that little piece. And I will say this, I had my meeting with the other 3 city mayors last week. I don't need to go into amounts, but Coppell, they were an outlier. They fund 16 different organizations. Their total is way less. It's about a third of what was presented here, split among 16 organizations. Some of the organizations only get like $2,500, but yet they have to go through this process. And I know we pared down the number of organizations over time since you came on board.
Mhm.
So, you know, and here we're only looking at 4, 5. But if you want to leave the family place in there, uh, we need some direction there.
So,
10?
Mayor, I would suggest 10. Reading Family Place's request, Farmers Branch Impact was court-ordered battering intervention and prevention program, 8 people. Emergency shelter, 4 people. Non-residential counseling, 15. And then a B project, I don't know what B project is, 58. It's a small number of people, but if you're one of those people, it's everything that day.
I will, you know, I think at some point we invite them in to come and explain what all that is.
They did before, I just don't.
That's
I
up,
don't
it's
remember
up to you.
entirely. Yeah.
They've all come.
Yeah.
And so
I'm fine with either 10 or 15. I don't know that it makes really a big difference.
It doesn't, frankly, it doesn't.
I'm fine with either.
Okay, so let's keep it at 15.
thank you for direction.
15.
Okay.
So just to confirm, 200 combined for one contract for MetroCrest services, and the other amounts remain as presented. Contracts coming at the next
50,
council meeting.
15 in chambers.
Yep. All right, we'll bring these to you all at the next council meeting for formal action.
So that should be about 3:13.
Thank you.
Okay. Is that good?
Yes.
Okay.
Direction is always
All
always
right.
appreciated.
Thank you. Moving forward, A9, discuss the Christmas lighting and decor contract.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Jeff Fairchild, Special Events Manager in the Parks and Recreation Department. Yes, it's Christmas in July. Here today to discuss our Christmas lighting and decor contract. Just to give you a little background, for many years, dating back from 2018, moving forward, we were using multiple vendors to put up what you see around town. It would be whether it's for the lights around hanging in the trees, around the trunks, whether it would be some decor, things of that nature. And just for example, last year we were contracting or working with up to 4 vendors just to put up our Christmas tree that we had recently purchased. And it just got to be a lot of different. You can imagine me trying to manage all of these different parties and their expertise in it. At one time, it was because it was, okay, this company specializes in this project, this company specializes in that. And as we have evolved through the years with our purchases and things that we have done for our Christmas look here in Farmers Branch, it was kind of realizing, hey, I think there are companies out there that can be turnkey for us, be one and done, so to speak. And in an effort to streamline the operations and the efficiency, it was determined, let's go out and bid in March and wrap everything under one umbrella, and so that we could find one company to handle all of our needs. And we were fortunate in that we received 3 bids. And Premier Lighting Enterprises, a company that we are familiar with, we have worked with them and recently as 2021, came in as the recommended preferred vendor for an annual cost of $175,000. So just a little bit of comparison of previous spending to give you an idea of what this stacks up against. So as you can see in previous years, dating back 1819, of course, a big purchase there with the outdoor ice rink, still paying for the lights, the installation, dropped down a little bit there for the second year in 1920 fiscal year, but still you can see the expenditures in 2021, if you recall, was the first year that the city took a look at, hey, these 2D, 3D pieces. If you recall, the lawn of the police department that year had about 6 or 7 pieces on there, and worked with a company out of California to rent those pieces. So that was where you saw that jump that year. And then, of course, our big purchase, really getting in the game, so to speak, with the tree that we purchased that fiscal year. We purchased some other the trees. I got some photos later on. I can show you things at the dog park, some other photo op opportunities. And so that was our kind of big year to make these purchases and an ornament package that went with the tree. And then we also expanded on what we did at the police department and like, hey, we've got other locations around Farmers Branch. On the west side, we can do the library, we can do the fire station, parks locations. So that was in that 21-22 where you see that big expenditure. And then there was the reduction last fiscal year where we did not have a lot of the rented decor. We still were able to put up lights and trees, put up our Christmas tree, but that's kind of, and then today is the proposed 175,000 to get us back into council requested that we see more of this decor, bring it back. We liked what we saw. And so that was added back into the bid. But just kind of reiterating, these are things that we have been doing. It's just a desire to put them all under one roof, so to speak. So what does the scope of this look like? So City Hall, if you're walking in, you drive up William Dodson, you see the beautiful trees, the live oaks, the snowflakes, the Patinia trees out front, the Grove, Liberty Plaza, you have the trunks wrap, as I mentioned, the Christmas tree, ornament package, the angel wing photo ops, our lovely parks crew there displaying, that's a very popular photo op there at the Grove. The pecan trees, those 3 red, white, and blue trees. That is a full wrap. That is a job in itself, just watching them put that up. The contractor, then we do some work at the Bark Park. And then I've got a picture to show you that a little bit later. And then these pieces that we put throughout the city. These are 8 locations. These are just kind of what we looked at as high traffic, whether it be vehicular, whether it be foot traffic, are they good visibility, a good balance, so to speak, amongst the city's various different entities. And then finally, is there power available? Got to have that. But the things that, if you notice, have to be done starting in September because it takes so long. That is the wrapping of these trees. And there are 4 things in particular there with the asterisk by them. I'll get into those specifically a little bit later, but those require us to basically split this contract up into 2, what we need to pay for now and what we need to, pending your approval, can be done after October 1. So these are just a little bit example of the garland on the Bark Park fence there, some of the lighted decor that we've put up around town. The lower left, those are those 3 trees in the middle poles at the Bark Park, which we own, but this company would be involved in putting those up for us. Some other things, the lighting, the trunk wrapping at the Grove there, coming up City Hall. So it's just a beautiful thing what they're doing, this contractor, this Premier Lighting. So as I mentioned, the terms and payment, the total project cost is $175. Splitting it up so that this company can get started in September. Yes, they will be out there starting to wrap trees. Paying for that would amounts to about $49,000 out of this year's funds, fiscal year. We do have the money to pay for this. We have a contract that we are currently facilitating with that right now to have city managers signed to execute so that this company can get going with that. We have those funds available for these 4 projects right here. And then the remaining 125 pending your approval. And that's really kind of to get you guys prepared for what you'll see in your budget retreat. When you see this number, you'll know that this is what this is for, that remaining 125. And actually the number is going to be higher because if you have to think about it, we need basically about another 50,000 for next year at this time so that the contractor can, just kind of carrying forward, so to speak. So that's why you'll see a much larger number than the 125. And then the remaining projects that will be pending approval would be taking care of what you see here, the installations, our beautiful tree there that we purchased that we now own, the locations around the Bark Park that we mentioned earlier in some of the pictures there. And so, but I do want to put in here the caveat that the rented decor, that would be basically what's available on October 1 because not being able to commit those funds now. So it's just kind of what the contractor, the Premier Lighting, has said, hey, we will hold as much as we can for you guys in these various locations, but it's pending what they have available. But the other things that the putting up the tree, the dog park, the garland, those are things that are pretty much given. Stuff we're renting, we're kind of at the mercy of that contractor come October 1. So you will see us again, probably October 10th, because we do need to get that contract pending your approval. We'll know obviously at that point if the funds are available, then we'll be right back with a contract which covers the remaining items here. And that's questions.
So I have a question. Ben, can you make that number work?
Yes, absolutely.
Good.
All right.
I'm good.
Good.
Okay.
All right. Thank you all.
You good?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Rounds.
Okay. So I'm going to break here, and I'm sorry to do this. We just ran long on some other stuff. So we're going to go downtown. I'm going to give you all some time between now and meeting start. We will come back and after the council meeting and finish up with A10, 11, and 12. I'm sorry to do that, but I think it's probably the best thing to do.
After
At this
that, you're gonna
point.
come back here. Okay.
Council, for consent item H6, we have an updated policy on the non-regulatory signs, so I'll just give you a copy. So it's on the consent agenda. We just added some defined terms. That was it.
Will we need to read that downstairs?
No, sir.
Okay. The other thing you'll note, each of your places, I put some information from the I-35 project.
Yes.
Please take that.
That's what they came up with.
Lone Star Constructors sends out a update every Sunday afternoon regarding the I-35 project. They came and spoke at the last council meeting. At the last chamber meeting, and presented some really good information. So you might want to just click on the QR code to subscribe to get their weekly updates. And with that, we will recess until after the council meeting. It's 5:32.
Thought that was mine. Mine's over here.